Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your old pal Devo back with another session of Draw. Today we're going to be looking at a piece that I did revolving around the Red Dead Redemption artwork. I'm a huge fan of this game. I'm sure a lot of people know about this, and I've been doing a lot of just kind of experimenting and playing around with the style. I'm not exactly sure who the original artist is for the Red Dead art, but man, tip of the hat to this guy or girl or for doing such an amazing job on this stuff, because it is really awesome art and awesome work. But you know, here I'm kind of doing some character profiles for the RP server that I play on, Gold Rush RP, and I'm kind of just mimicking the style the best that I can. And you know, I encourage a lot of artists just to kind of look at, you know, artists that you're inspired by or different types of art, just to challenge yourself to try different styles, because I think in the most part, you know, when you do something like this, you kind of just learn from the process of observing and experimenting that could ultimately bring new ingredients to your own personal art. So, and I don't normally draw or paint like this, you know, with no outlines and kind of more of like a traditional stance of painting, but you know, I have done it in the past multiple times, so it's always good to kind of refresh my memory and challenge myself a little bit. But you know, for the most part, I kind of just start off with this rough sketch of the character, and use that as kind of like a guide for laying down these flat colors. Now, for the most part, I'm using just a basic brush for this flat process, and kind of working my way up using you know, using different masks that I'm creating for the overall silhouette of the character. You can see I kind of messed up the mask there, and I had to fix it up a little bit, but you know, it just kind of makes the process a little quicker, so I don't have to worry about going outside the lines, and I can keep every layer within the silhouette mask contained. So it just makes the process a lot quicker. So highly recommend using mask as much as possible for any piece of work that you're doing. I use it for everything. But yeah, you can kind of see that I'm putting everything on separate layers depending on like the type of clothing. So, you know, these browns I'm putting all on one layer. The green shirt is on a separate layer. This like little handkerchief. All sorts of things. So basically, you know, from what I've observed looking at this Red Dead art, it seems like this is kind of the process that they're using, where they're basically just building the basic flats first, and then kind of just working your way up layer by layer by layer. And that's usually how I do most of my work. I don't normally work just on one layer and kind of collapse layers. Sometimes I do that at the very end process if I'm doing like finite details and whatnot, but for the most part, I keep everything contained into layers, so I can make adjustments to either color or add clipping mask, which is an easy way to do a quick mask to add extra texture to a certain, you know, layer that you might be working on. For instance, for the shirts, you know, I added like a shirt texture that I'd found and applied it to it. But you could see that, you know, this is more of like a study of kind of this paint process, because this paint process is very interesting and unique, I think. And I've always loved the Red Dead art and GTA art style. It's a very cool way of doing a very illustrative way of painting. And I think it kind of challenges me and helps me get a little bit better. But here, you know, I'm basically using this color as a palette too, or this example from the artist, just to kind of sample the colors, and then, you know, ultimately I'll go back in there and make any, you know, slight adjustments like hue and saturation adjustments if I need to. Very strong tools in Photoshop to just, you know, basically lay down flats and make those adjustments last minute if you need to, through hue and saturation adjustments. But here, you know, I've just kind of looking at the artwork, I could see that there's three, you know, different color values that are being used to, you know, create these different shade shapes. that are being reflected off of the lighting source, which is coming off from the top right. And I've done a few of these now to kind of replicate, and I've noticed that I'm getting better and better and better. Definitely, the hair aspect is a little bit more tricky, but I think over time I kind of figured it out. And here, as I'm starting to do like the darker details with the outline of the character, again, I'm sampling from like the darks that are being used there, because it's not a pure black, it's more of like a kind of grayer tone. A lot of the times you don't want to go straight black, because it could add a little bit too much contrast to the image, where you kind of want to add a little bit lighter values in those darks in order to kind of blend the whole image better, a little bit more organically. But here I'm kind of mimicking how these contrasted blacks are being used within the shape, and trying my best just to kind of create those creases within the shirt, in the mustache. Here you can kind of see that I've adjusted the blacks and kept them on the layer of the shirt, and you can see I'm kind of going back and forth, just using the original artwork as a guide to how I should kind of approach it. Because the other thing too is that the way that this person who did the original art did these blacks, I've noticed that just from trial and error, that there's specific brushes that this person is using. I'm assuming that they've done this art in Photoshop or some sort of digital painting program, but I have a huge tool preset that I've collected over the years, and you can see the brush that I finally found that I think works really well with this is a little bit more crispy with the texture. Kind of has a almost like a hard pastel kind of outer line to it, and that just makes the piece feel a little bit more organic and less harsh in shapes. And basically just going in, doing those harsh highlights with the side of the face, and trying to really make the contrast as high as possible here. Yeah, for the most part too. Commercial break. For the most part too, I think the big thing to kind of like keep note here is to constantly just keep working on these layers and chipping away at the layering aspects of throwing in different values to make the image a little bit more dynamic. Here I'm kind of throwing down some different layers of shadows a little bit more, bringing in some values to kind of make it a little bit more dynamic. Here I'm tops in the handle a little bit back there. But yeah, I think the key that I've just been learning is ultimately just to don't worry too much at the beginning of trying to be completely perfect, but just keep chipping away at it and adding little pieces to make this a little bit more dynamic. And I'm trying not to make it too sharp with these shadow areas. The face is probably the most difficult part with these pieces that I've experienced. I'm sure once you get into doing like rifles and different types of items or props that characters are carrying, it might get a little bit more difficult. But ultimately, it's just trying to make the face as dynamic as possible, just so you get the best possible kind of result with the work. And I think for the most part, not having to work with any exterior line weight really really sets the image, I think, a little bit, blends it a little bit more with the background, because I think a lot of the times with outlines, illustrative outlines could really pop out the character more than you would need to. Yeah, here I'm trying to do create like mimic some different creases, you know, bring up the opacity a little bit, just trying to add pieces to it to make it a little bit more dynamic so it doesn't seem flat. Because I mean, in my perception, the art does seem somewhat flat, but I think ultimately, you know, these little subtle um, layering techniques can really pop out the dynamic aspects of the drawing more often than not. You know, adding some different shades and um, values to the blood just to kind of make it a little bit more dynamic so it's not so flat. Little things like that just to kind of pop it out a little bit more really gives you an effective piece. But yeah, I think you know, a lot of people are interested in how this kind of Red Dead art is approached, and I think this is the way that it's normally approached. I could be completely wrong, based on, you know, the original artists that did this stuff. But I would encourage anybody watching this, if they do happen to find who the original artist is, you know, please post it in the chat down below, comment, like this video. That would mean a lot to me and would be super sweet. And I'd love to see, you know, I'd love to see the original artist's work too, just to kind of, you know, see the stuff that they've done, be inspired by them, you know, give them some love and whatnot. But yeah, this is again, just, I always try to challenge myself with different types of art styles because I think it's really, really helpful for my ultimate, you know, end tool set, because, you know, you never want to be just pigeonholed in drawing in one type of style. You want to kind of motivate yourself to try as many different things as possible. And I think, you know, and here I've noticed in a lot of the artwork, it seems like, you know, there's a lot of photography that's kind of mixed into it. So it's probably painted by the original artist, but I'm just doing like a quick fix and just finding a photo and, you know, adding some blur and changing the transfer mode a little bit just to kind of make it feel more dynamic. Here I'm doing a little bit tighter details with the hair. I started using a lot more smart objects too, because I noticed that smart objects are really, really effective when you're trying to kind of blend the piece into like the background and that sort of thing. I tend to, you know, add a little Gaussian blur to my character and then try to soften up the image a little bit just so it doesn't feel too harsh. And I think that makes it feel a little bit more organic and like a, you know, illustrative piece. But yeah, ultimately, this is kind of where I came to the end, and I think it turned out really nice. And I encourage you guys to maybe take a stab at it yourself and see if you could come up with something similar. But yeah, thanks again for hanging out, and I will see you on the next edition of Draw. Thanks everybody for hanging out. Bye bye.